please come. I need you. This is I need you.
Nadine Lott was born in the late 80s in Arklow, Ireland. Her parents, Claire and David Lott, had Tadid, Kyle, the only boy, and finally, Phoebe. From a young age, Nadine stood out for being outgoing and friendly. She was always the life of the group, making everyone laugh. Over time, her charisma became more apparent. With a smile and a simple greeting, she made everyone feel welcome. People loved being around her. Additionally, Nadine was very sensitive and always saw the good in people. Regarding home life, it was not only harmonious, but also filled with trust among everyone, something that Claire and David always fostered with each of their children. As an adult, Nadine showcased her love for photography. On one occasion, Claire asked her why she enjoyed capturing every moment so much. Nadine said they were memories, a way to create lasting memories. Over time, Nadine blossomed into a beautiful woman. Her trademark was her flirtatiousness, always well-groomed even for workouts, with painted lips. She decided to pursue a career as an esthetician, finding success in that field. Although her love life wasn't very eventful in her early 20s, having had few boyfriends, in June 2012, Nadine went to Australia with friends to enjoy a gap year, not ruling out the possibility of working. Claire felt saddened to see Nadine leave, but didn't want to discourage her. It was then, over 15,000 kilometers from home, that Nadine met another Irishman, Daniel Murtagh. Daniel, a couple of years older, was from Clondalkin, near Dublin. It was known that he worked installing windows and lived with his family on Melrose Avenue, but little else was known about him. Nadine and Daniel began a romance she described as casual, one of those that arise on holidays, without complications or commitments. At first, she only told her sister Phoebe about Daniel. It was Phoebe who eventually told their mother. Claire understood it to be something light, as if Nadine had deep feelings for Daniel. She would have communicated it herself. In June 2013, Nadine returned home with significant changes in her life. She became pregnant shortly after meeting Daniel. Although he moved to Dublin and they lived together, the relationship didn't work. When their daughter Kia was born in November 2003, Phoebe was by her side, supporting her, and she was the one who took the first mother-daughter photos, not Daniel. In the following years, Nadine did her utmost to give her daughter everything, including the presence of a father. Although her feelings for Daniel were never of true love, Kia was her priority. But Daniel's disinterest and irresponsibility as a father clashed with Nadine's efforts. In 2016, she tried to salvage the relationship by renting a house for the three of them. But when Daniel didn't show up, Nadine decided it was enough. She wasn't upset or concerned about Daniel's fate. It was more a matter of pride. She had been disappointed, and everyone could sense it. Even though Nadine and Daniel were going their separate ways, she still held on to the hope that her daughter could have a relationship with her father. However, for Claire, it was clear that Daniel wouldn't change in that regard. Meanwhile, in Daniel's life, about which we knew little, a new idea emerged: to train and learn boxing. He dedicated himself entirely to achieving this. In October 2019, Claire took Nadine to Rome to celebrate her 30th birthday. While enjoying the place, mother and daughter talked about everything. Nadine, open and sincere, confessed to Claire that at that point in her life, a romantic relationship was not her concern or priority. She felt fulfilled, especially with her greatest achievement, being the best possible mother to Kia. She didn't believe she needed a partner and was proud of her work, her home, and everything she had accomplished. As if that wasn't enough, she was recently contacted for some modeling opportunities. The future looked promising. Back in Ireland, reality showed its most frustrating side every time Daniel promised to visit Kia and then didn't show up. At the same time, to give money to his daughter, he demanded Nadine's face-to-face meetings. Daniel's controlling desire made Claire suspect that he was using the child as an excuse to meet with his daughter. Despite everything, Nadine never criticized Daniel in front of Kia. Even in the face of his indiscretions, she made up excuses to maintain a positive image of her father for the child. But the situation became unbearable, as Daniel didn't want Nadine to be with another man. Therefore, Nadine was forced to hide details of her personal life from him. It was easier than enduring his complaints. In late 2019, she started dating a Turkish guy. Somehow, Daniel found out about my new relationship, and he didn't take it well. One day, I received a text message in which he made it clear that he knew what was going on. I didn't give it more importance than necessary. Despite Despite his flaws, at least Daniel had never been physically violent. However, he continued to intimidate me with phone calls. On December 5th of that year, I told him clearly in a WhatsApp message not to threaten me and that nothing more would happen between us. 4 days later, I informed him that I planned to go celebrate my aunt's birthday at a local pub on December 13th. We agreed that he would stay to take care of Kia while I enjoyed time with my family. At that time, Daniel lived with his parents in Clondalkin, Dublin, and I had my apartment in Wicklow. After midnight, already on December 14th, Daniel sent me a message asking me to come back soon. He tried to call me at 12:57 a.m. and 1:26 a.m., but he couldn't get through. A few minutes passed, and I returned home. I took off my clothes, put on pajamas, and carefully folded the dress I wore that night. So far, it has not been possible to reconstruct exactly what happened next. In summary, Daniel attacked with such violence that even little Kia, 6 years old and terrified, shouted and begged him to stop, not to hurt her mom. Not even his own daughter's desperate plea could stop him, as he continued the assault with his own hands. Around 4 a.m., my friend and neighbor, Amela Kulinovic, heard the screams. At first, she thought it was yearly celebrations, but then she realized someone was crying. Amela went to investigate and entered the apartment after finding the door open and the hallway light on. I found her on the floor, face down, with Daniel on top of her in the midst of the attack. His expression, his grunts, everything about him seemed more like a fierce animal than a man. Filled with panic at that terrifying sight, I retreated to my house and called Nadine's family. Claire thought it was a domestic dispute, and perhaps we would find her daughter with a stab wound. With that thought, I ran to the apartment with Kyle and Phoebe. Meanwhile, Daniel fled in his car, a Volvo. As soon as we crossed the door, I realized how cautious I had been because we were met with a scene worthy of a horror movie. Nadine's blood splattered every corner, with broken glass and mirrors scattered on the floor. Upon reaching the kitchen, the three of us couldn't help but scream upon discovering Nadine's body. We immediately called emergency services. Meanwhile, about 30 kilometers away in Larag, Daniel crashed into a ditch and suffered minor injuries. John Begley, a driver passing by with his wife on the Bukis Bridge at that time in the morning, saw the incident and stopped to help. At first, he thought it was someone drunk coming from some Christmas party. When he saw that there was no one inside the car, he returned to his vehicle and continued on his way. Later, he noticed a man standing on the side of the road, staggering, with unmoving legs, confirming his theory. But as he approached, Daniel told him that he had killed his wife because she was with a friend. Afterward, they took Daniel by ambulance. During the journey, he kept repeating to the paramedic how much he loved his girlfriend. Meanwhile, a team of 4 paramedics and 2 security officers headed to Nadine's house. Approaching the door, officers Linda Butler and Ben Silverlark noticed a strong smell of blood. Paramedic Ian Clark was shocked to see the amount of furniture broken everywhere, but his horror was even greater when he saw Nadine's condition. Ian was sure that this image would haunt him throughout his career. As Nadine was unconscious, Linda and Claire attempted to revive her with mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. Although the effort seemed futile due to the large amount of blood and debris, Ian struggled to see all the wounds. Around 6:43 a.m., they took her to St. Vincent's Hospital. She was admitted to the intensive care unit at 10:58 a.m. Despite traumatic injuries to the head, neck, and chest, about 64 of these injuries could not be explained by medical intervention. Additionally, she needed several transfusions. Claire brought some of Nadine's belongings and placed them near her bed in the hospital. She put a photo of her toiletry bag, her perfume, and pictures of Kia. Although she didn't know what kind of damage Nadine would have when she woke up, she thought all those images would help her remember and provide a comfort. As a mother, Claire held on to the hope that her daughter would regain consciousness. Over time, she tried to convince herself that the injuries were superficial and that, in the end, there would be healing, despite the evidence before her eyes. Second by second, she imagined her back, no matter in what state. She knew it would be a long recovery, maybe months, and she would likely need plastic surgery. Those were the thoughts swirling in her head. On December 16th, while Nadine fought for her life, Daniel had to appear in Bray District Court and was then remanded in custody, charged with assault causing serious harm. Then, she had to appear before Clover Hill Court. Meanwhile, they took Nadine for another brain scan. From her chair, as a dedicated mother, I continued to send strength to my daughter, begging her to show how strong and resilient she was. But on December 17th at 3:16 p.m., due to the severe injuries, Nadine passed away. Throughout her time in the hospital, she never regained consciousness. Declan McCarthy, superintendent of the Irish law enforcement, who led the investigation, said that in his 40 years of service, he had never seen so much violence, an opinion shared by the doctors. Dr. Linda Mulligan, chief state pathologist, performed Nadine's autopsy at the Dublin Funeral Home on December 18th. She was dressed in a hospital gown and weighed 78 kilograms, including the bag they stored her in, so she probably weighed less. My head was filled with thoughts. Despite everything, I would never know what happened. There were a million opinions, scenarios, and sounds. During the interrogation, 34-year-old Daniel recounted the blows he inflicted, sitting forward in his chair as he did and striking his other hand's palm with his fist. He also explained how he used a tire pump charger with the cable wrapped around his knuckles to deliver a powerful blow. He claimed to have had an intermittent relationship with Nadine for the last 3 months and called her his future wife. After a massive vigil in her honor, Nadine's funeral took place on December 22nd at St. Mary and St. Peter's Church in her hometown, Arklow. Close to 1,000 people filled all the seats and lined the back and side walls of the building. Outside, hundreds more gathered in a nearby hall to watch the funeral online or stood in front of the church listening to speakers broadcast the proceedings. 6 men carried the white coffin on their shoulders. Once by the altar, they placed a bouquet of ivory roses on the casket. They also placed a pair of shiny stiletto heels filled with flowers, symbolizing Nadine's lively social life full of fun and joy. Claire spoke with a clear voice, barely trembling with emotion, about the love and pride she felt for her daughter. Sitting in the front pew of the church, surrounded by her mother's family and friends, Kia seemed oblivious to the magnitude of the occasion. But as the grandmother said, addressing the child, Kia now had her own guardian angel. Despite everything, Claire still resisted talking about her daughter in the past tense. Towards the altar, David carried one of her handbags, a shiny black and gold symbol of her life, and the grace with which she could turn an ordinary object into a glamorous accessory to highlight her obvious beauty. Kyle carried a photo of Nadine and Kia lying on the floor, looking at the camera, laughing and relaxed like a pair of friends. Her sister Phoebe carried another pair of stiletto heels, and her sister, Tanith, a photo album. The priest in charge of the ceremony, Michael Murtagh, expressed the dismay of almost everyone by pointing out how absurd it was for a mother and father to bury their young daughter. It was a thought he returned to again and again in his funeral homily. But even though he knew that any speech fell short, Father Michael wanted to convey to those present, especially the family, that death did not have the final say, as Nadine would continue to live through Kia. Thus, the story concluded with a new life, an eternal and enduring life. It was power, hope, resurrection. Then, the priest addressed Nadine's friends and her generation directly, posing a fundamental question: how to honor Nadine's memory with one's own life. The appropriate answer, as he suggested, was to live honestly and decently. In an emotional moment, he took the opportunity to thank Kia for inspiring him with her joy and wished her, as she grew up, to have a safe and loving home. Tanith and Phoebe briefly expressed how their hearts broke when their sisters stopped beating. Then Nadine was laid to rest in St. Gabriel's Cemetery. The legal proceedings against Daniel were adjourned to Clover Hill District Court until January 14th, when he was to appear via video link. Lawyer Imon O'Moore requested Judge David Kennedy to prepare a psychiatric report, and the request was granted. No bail application was submitted. On January 14th, 2020, at Clover Hill District Court, Daniel was charged with murder, and although he pleaded guilty, it was for involuntary manslaughter, not the attributed charge. In his plea, he argued being too intoxicated during the events, nullifying his intent. Specifically, Daniel claimed to have smoked cannabis, ingested 2 pills, and consumed 350 milliliters of pure rum. The trial took place before Judge Michael McGrath and a jury of 7 men and 5 women in Court 19 of the Criminal Courts of Justice. In his opening statement, prosecution lawyer John O'Kelly expressed that the evidence would reveal how grotesque and unnatural the attack on Nadine was. Claire attended every day of the trial, except for the 2 days when Daniel's interview video with authorities was presented, at which point she preferred to stay home with Kia. Up to that point, Daniel had never apologized. Claire found his behavior in the courtroom repugnant, especially when he blew kisses to his mother from the defendant's dock before being taken to the cells every night. An intensive care nurse from the hospital informed the jury about Nadine's unrecognizable state, emphasizing that throughout her career, she had never seen anything like it. Later, Dr. Linda testified for 2 hours, detailing the numerous injuries. Nadine's family had to hear the details, while Daniel's face showed no expression. Then, he could greet his family and friends, expressing his love and promising more calls later. For David, the mere fact that Daniel did not fully acknowledge his guilt and, therefore, subjected them to this judicial process was another sign of Daniel's sick mentality and lack of remorse for the torture, pain, and terror he inflicted on Nadine. In the end, Daniel was convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment. However, it is important to note that, according to Irish laws, the average duration of this sentence is equivalent to 18 years behind bars. For David and Claire, the idea that their daughter's murderer could not only be released in that period, but also apply for parole after 12 years in prison is unbearable.
Because until we got to sentencing and we got to give the victim impact statement, I felt that Nadine's voice, Nadine as a person, was lost. She was evidence as we listened to different elements through the trial.
On the other hand, Daniel was stunned by the verdict. According to Claire, neither he nor his family truly thought the trial would take that turn. She believes he always trusted that the jury would believe him, indicating his excessive egocentrism. Although he was transferred to Whitefield Prison, he received death threats, so they placed him in a special protection area for his safety, away from the majority of the inmate population. A prison source later claimed that Daniel saw himself as the victim, supporting Claire's opinion. Later, he appealed the sentence and proclaimed to anyone who would listen that he would soon be free. For his own safety, he was transferred to Midlands Prison. Meanwhile, aware that December was marked as the most tragic month, our main focus was to give Kia the best possible Christmas memories. The little one still held on to the excitement of Santa's arrival. In 2021, to commemorate what would have been Nadine's 32nd birthday, Phoebe shared an emotional video montage of her sister on social media, accompanied by a heartfelt message. Towards the end of the video, Kia sang a song in memory of her mother. Life without Nadine became for Claire an endless pain, a palpable void, and every night she relived scenes from that nightmare. Meanwhile, the culprit's name ceased to be mentioned at home. In his most recent statements, given in December 2022, David shared that December and Christmas continued to be particularly distressing times for the family. However, the presence of his beautiful granddaughter uplifted them, making what would be utterly unbearable without her a bit more manageable. David expressed how much he missed his daughter's smile, her energy, her humor, and the unique way she uttered certain phrases or carried out her actions. In January 2023, Daniel was assaulted by another inmate in Midlands Prison, sustaining a significant injury to a large part of his face. When staff intervened, Daniel was losing a considerable amount of blood, prompting an urgent transfer to Port Louis Hospital. The inmate responsible for the attack was swiftly subdued by prison officials. The assault seems to have been a bid to establish dominance within the prison hierarchy, despite the staff's efforts. The bleeding was severe, requiring close medical observation. It was later reported that Daniel would bear the scars from this incident for life. In honor of Nadine, and as a measure to ensure Kia's financial well-being, the Nadine Lot Trust Fund was established, and thus concludes today's criminal story. I would love to hear your thoughts, so I encourage you to leave your comments on the video, always showing respect for the victim and her family. We can exchange ideas, but let's always maintain the respect that everyone deserves. Remember to subscribe and hit the like button to let me know you enjoy my work. Good night, and until the next criminal story.